Thank you for joining us on mountvernon.org. The following conversations will explore how a shoe like this would be equivalent to a shoe like this in the 18th century. I would like to introduce Al Segudo, Master Boot and Shoemaker at Colonial Williamsburg. Al will be discussing 18th century shoemaking. So Al, briefly discuss the process of shoemaking. How would it begin and how would the shoes be finished?
Well, since antiquity, shoemaking has been a series of divided tasks. It's never something that just one man does alone or a thing that's made one at a time. And by the time the Washingtons are ordering shoes from London and the firms they're dealing with, some of these firms employ 160 workmen. So it's rather complex. Tasks are basically broken down into the same three specialties as they have been for 2,000 years. Cutting the uppers, sewing the uppers together, and then assembling all the prepared parts. And particularly in the case of Martha's shoes, this includes mass-produced wooden heels that the shoemakers have to buy in. Heel coverings were often dyed by specialists who only dyed women's shoe heel covers. And the embellishments on the uppers, particularly the wedding shoes, could have been done by a different hand than the person who made the uppers. So you're talking about a collective of maybe 4 or 5 different people just to produce the shoe. They were all piece wages. They were paid by the piece. So the faster they worked, the more money they made, and the slower they worked, the less money they made. But all of this generally happened under one roof, or a lot of times employing outworkers around town to get the shoes done.
Al, what did you find personally fascinating about the extant invoices of Martha Washington's shoes?
I think as a whole, the Washington shoe inventories, as they cover 50 years of shoe purchases by a Virginia gentry family, particularly mail order, first before the war from the UK and then after the war from Philadelphia, provide insights to footwear that we don't really have from anywhere else. The difficulty with them is the terminologies are sometimes used loosely, the confusing number of sizes, multiple sizes are given ostensibly for Martha, and all this we don't know if the shoe orders are just for Martha or for her servants. At one point George orders shoes on his last for his servants in his invoice, so we know that he's ordering multiple pairs for multiple people. We don't know about Martha, but I think for an enterprising student this would make a great master's thesis.
Could you possibly discuss the sizing of shoes in the 18th century?
I think the same problems plagued the Washingtons with their mail order shoe business with London that would plague anyone today. That's getting the same size that fits you the last time over and over again. Some of the notations in their invoices and the correspondence suggest they were having some fit problems. Shoes are coming in a little too narrow, not quite long enough, but of course then they get a little more interested in comfort as the years go by, and so forth and so on. The sizing that are mentioned in there is very interesting because rather than ordering the shoes to her measurements, which are mentioned later on in the invoices, early on she's ordering shoes by number sizes. But these sizes go all over the place. There's size 4s, size 5s, size 7s, size 6, the same thing, only a half size longer. And a lot of this relates to the way the shoes were measured and that the feet were measured with handy little items like this. Now, the increments of measure were standardized by the late 17th century and into the 18th century, but rarely two of these size sticks ever agree on what size it was. So it was really standard on the one hand, but not scientifically standard as we would know today.
Martha Washington's shoe invoices indicated that she purchased shoes in the largest 4s or the smallest 5s. Could you please describe what that means?
As far as the number sizes that you mentioned, it would be a little risky to try to equate them to modern American women's sizes. However, the detailed measurements from her wedding shoes from 1759 suggest that the shoe she wore was a U.S. modern woman's size 7.
Are there any similarities between how high-end or couture shoes are made today as they might have been made in the 18th century?
Well, interestingly enough, more so for men's high-end couture custom-made shoes today, a lot of the techniques still survive than do for women's shoes. Today, most of the high-end shoes you're thinking of for women are assembled with cement instead of stitching. The common features, of course, the shoe has to be built around a 3-dimensional last. That continues. The necessity for precise pattern making, that continues. And a few of the basic hand tools. But today is more the realm of glue and cement. And in the 18th century, it was the realm of very, very fine stitching, which, of course, demands a lot more skill.